Today we are going to share the story of King of Meru, Jackson Harvester Angaine. Arume, muga, batimantu, ndakandeke ndakandaka, shumaga mbere ya ryoha, ndaka shuka na korororima. Jackson Harvester Angaine was for a long time considered the king of Meru. He was a Mau Mau fighter who was jailed in 1952. And then he was released and is among the people who founded the Chama Kitukufu cha KANU. 1961, he was on the forefront. Actually, he was the leading person who campaigned for buying. He did an arambe to buy a Mercedes for Mzee Jomo Kenyatta after Mzee Jomo Kenyatta had been released from detention. This made Jomo Kenyatta like him until Kenyatta died. Upon independence, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta appointed him Minister for Lands. During Kenyatta's time, there was no other Minister for Lands. And Jackson Harvester Angaine had Godfrey Getahi wa Kariuki as his assistant minister. He continued, and you can remember those are the days when people used to grab land. He grabbed land left and right, and most of the land which used to be timed were getting a living Kaburu who had a castle in his shamba. So he grabbed somewhere in Timau such a land, and that house still stands today. But remembering very well about being a land minister is when he grabbed 23,000 acres of land. 23,000 acres of land. This is what happened. There were some people who were staying next to the forest, and they used to go farm in the forest, and these people went to the president. They sent 6 leaders. They sent 6 leaders from the forest dwellers, asking the president to hive off Mount Kenya forest so that each and every family gets some land. Remember, those days land was being given either 5 acres or 10 acres. Now, if it is 23,000 acres, if you remove it, if you divide it by 10, that is 2,300 families. 2,300 families. Then when the 6 leaders went and visited Jomo Kenyatta in State House, he authorized the Minister for Lands and the Minister for Forest and Wildlife to, the land belonged to forest, wildlife. By then it used to be called game and forest. And the land had to be hived off and made an ordinary shamba so as to be given to these squatters. The 6 leaders went to see the president in State House. Then the president, Jomo Kenyatta, authorized 2 ministers, that is Jackson Harvester Angaine and the then Minister for Wildlife, to look into the matter. So 2 pieces of land was set aside. One was about 5,000 acres, although I'm not sure if it is exactly 5, but something like that. And the other one was set aside for 23,000 acres. The smaller shamba was given to people used to get together. They called themselves Ngwataniro. Ngwataniro is cooperation or muungano or kushikana, yeah, joining up together. So when they formed this Ngwataniro, there was 2 pieces of land. One was about 5,000 acres, which was given to these people, and the other 23,000 acres, he was the Minister for Lands. The land was registered under Jackson Harvester Angaine and Sons. Another thing, I have met a son of Jackson Harvester Angaine. That was in 1979 or late 78. He was a chief inspector in the CID, nowadays called DCI. Those days, my father was a superintendent, and we had a vehicle, a Land Rover, which used to take us to school and back. So one day, somewhere near Angara post office, while going home, our driver gave a lift to somebody who was in civilian, and he introduced to me as Chief Inspector Angaine, son of the. And when they were talking, because the driver was on my right and Chief Inspector Angaine was on my left, when the driver was always referring to him, Afande, Afande, Afande. But this Chief Inspector Angaine was very humble. He was talking to him as if they were of the same rank, and he was whatever, and they were talking about police work. I was impressed by Chief Inspector Angaine because even though he was a senior officer, even though he was a son of one of the most powerful Kenyans then, but the way he handled himself was so casual, and I was impressed. Another milestone in Angaine's life history is about his daughter, Captain Judy Angaine. She was a military officer of the rank, a commissioned officer of the rank of captain. She died under very mysterious circumstance because she had, those days, nowadays, military personnel who are ladies are allowed to get married. They are allowed to get married to any man, be it a military officer, be it a civilian officer. Now, if she gets married to an officer who is of a higher rank than her, the two are permitted to, let's say the lady is a sergeant and she gets married to a captain. Nowadays, they have access to both officers' mess and sergeants' mess, and vice versa. We have cases where a woman can be a lieutenant colonel and be married to a corporal, a military corporal. They can have access to both messes, whereby they are treated. You know, when you're in the mess that does not belong to you, but your spouse belongs to that mess, then you are given the respect and honors of a spouse of a member of that mess. But during Captain Judy Angaine's time, they used to be single. That is a story for another day. But she had 2 boyfriends. She had a boyfriend who was a military man called Major Kisilu, and she had a boyfriend who was called Paul Joseph Ngei. Then one day, she died. She was killed the way Monica Walamuria, the lady who was doing business in Sudan, was killed. And Major Musila was arrested. and charged with murder. But all along, I'm a former police officer. We were always told that to be careful with the police women because she always has 2 boyfriends, and if she gets pregnant, she will choose you, the constable, as the one responsible for her pregnancy. And once you marry her, she will start going openly with a senior officer, and she'll tell you that of course you knew you are 2 of you before we even got married. So in this case, and I'm not talking of police women of today, I'm talking of police women of my time. That is 20, 30 years ago. Now, this one also had 2 boyfriends, Major Musila and Paul Ngei. She seemed to be refer Canvas. Why? Ndiese bau bena obo wa Angai nenge vinyatiwo. Her preferences were Kamba men. Then she died in circumstances that are similar to what Monica died recently at Lamuria. And the police arrested Musila. Public opinion was that Paul Ngei is the one who murdered her. But, they go for the small man, and Musila was arrested. The funny thing is, the case dragged for long, but on the day of judgment, there's something very curious here. The day of judgment, Musila was found not guilty. Now listen here. After being found not guilty, already there was a few Land Rovers there with military, Kenya Army Land Rovers. He was given a heroic visit to the camp, and there was a big party celebrating his win of the case. If you look at that case and you look at Andrew Mudhemba also won a case and immediately went under. They had already cooked and were ready to celebrate. How did they know the judgment? And for your information, if you are having a case and you win, you are not released from the dock. No. You have to re-enter the Mariamu, go back to committee, because in committee the records are saying that we have you, the suspect, from remand. You have gone to law courts and you cannot be released at the law courts. When the law courts you are found not guilty, the judgment is taken to the officer in charge committee or any other prison that you are taken to. Then you are taken back to your cells. When you are taken back to your cells, then the officer in charge now reduces the number of inmates by 1 and gives you a release order. And that is when you are released from the gate of committee or any other prison that you are jailed. But this fellow was released, and from there were Land Rovers and he was taken there. We cannot talk much about that. As I said, throughout Jomo Kenyatta's time, Jackson Harvester Angaine was the Minister for Lands. When Jomo Kenyatta died, Moi had the ministers take their oath of allegiance publicly. I'm not aware whether Jomo Kenyatta used to do it publicly. And if those of you who are there, or if you can get that tape, you'll find that Geoffrey Waridhi, who was the secretary to the cabinet and permanent secretary in the office of the president, had a hard time reading out the oath of office of Jackson Harvester Angaine, because he was saying, mimi naapa kwamba sitatoa siri ya serikali. But Angaine kept on saying, when it reached that time, he said, mimi Jackson Harvester Angaine naapa kwamba nitatoa. And Geoffrey Waridhi would tell him, sitatoa. But he would repeat, nitatoa. But as you saw Rigiji during his swearing in at Kasarani, the instructions are that you repeat until the person says the actual word. So after 3 or 4 times of saying, mimi Jackson Harvester Angaine nitatoa siri ya serikali, he later changed it and said, sitatoa siri ya serikali. From there, that was 1978, and the following year, there was a general election, and he lost his seat to Ntere Bogori. He lost it to Ntere Bogori, but that was 1979. But in 1983, he got it again. He got it again. That is one term between 79 and 83, he was out. But during the snap general election of 1983, he won it back and was appointed Minister of State in the office of the President Moi. He stayed there from 1983 up to 1992, when he lost to David Mwiraria of the Democratic Party. Henry Mwiraria, you can remember, he was made by Kibaki later to be the Minister for Finance. And that, viewers, is about Jackson Harvester Angaine, King of Meru.